Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
My computer has a problem, so I will need to close the computer, but I'm using my phone, which is not ideally. Come on, Anes.
Because of this, but you could always move over. Like a desk or something pulls out.
Well, they don't seem to make them.
No,
Oh, we're on the phone. That was here. Place here.
Give me one more minute to see if I can. Okay, my computer ran into a problem. I need to restart. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I can only see 4 of you at a time. I know that Cheryl and Nora and Ted and Judy and Iris and Tina and Susan and David and the Zellmans. Okay, you see each other. I only see a few of you at a time, so I'm going to open my Gemara and we will begin. And when the computer restarts, I will open the computer and I will be able to see all of you, God willing. That's not nice. Look at that. Just realized something that happened. Okay. Okay, we are on page 132 at the bottom of the page, correct?
Yes.
So we are discussing the laws of Ben Sorer Umore, this very specific case in the book of the Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, in which I want just to read very, very quickly. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastised him will not hearken to them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the city and to the gates of his place, and they shall say to the elders of the city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voices. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And the men of his city shall stone him with stones that he dies. So shall you evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Okay, so this is the verse. I'm going just to open the computer so I let it work while we work together. Okay, so we are at the bottom of page 132. I did not have time to review, so hopefully we'll be able to do it together. I'm going to ask Steve if it's okay if you can read. Okay.
What page is that again, please?
Page 132 at the bottom of the page. If
okay, thank you.
Just give me one, please, another second.
I don't know.
The sage is right there. 2 paragraphs on the bottom of page 132. There?
All right, the sages taught in Baraita. If a woman was acting lewdly with a minor son, and he performed the initial stage of intercourse with her, Beit Shammai say that he has thereby disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. And Beit Hillel deem her fit to marry into the priesthood because they maintain that the intercourse of a minor is not regarded as intercourse.
Okay, again, this is okay, let me ask you just to read briefly the background, the second background on the page 132, procreation of the young girl, young age.
Although the sages themselves identify the onset of puberty at 12 years of age for girls and 13 years of age for boys, they knew that there were exceptional cases of pregnancy and birth at younger ages due to hormonal changes and diseases such as Cushing's disease. These are instances of exceedingly early onset of puberty, even in the first years of life, allowing for the possibility of begetting children and giving birth at a very early age.
Let's look at the halakha, the next halakha.
All concede regard to a boy 9 years and 1 day old that his intercourse is intercourse. The intercourse of a boy less than 9 years and 1 day old is not regarded as intercourse. If he engages in intercourse with a woman, she is not liable to receive any punishment, and she is not rendered a zonah who is disqualified from marrying the priesthood. If he is 9 years and 1 day old, his intercourse is regarded as intercourse, and she is both liable to receive punishment and rendered a zonah. This is in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel.
Okay, so now let's go back to what you just read again. Steve, let me ask you to read it one more time. I would like to explain a couple of concepts there. The sages taught in Hebraita. One more time, please, Steve.
The woman was acting lewdly with a minor son, and he performed the initial stage of intercourse with her. Beit Shammai say that he has thereby disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. And Beit Hillel deemed her fit to marry into the priesthood because they maintain that the intercourse of a minor is not regarded as an intercourse.
So I want this. I like just to talk a little about this expression, acting lewdly. In Hebrew, the Hebrew is mesolelot or mesolelet. Mesolelet will be in Talmudic expression. Note that it is in this context is the reference to sexual activity between women, and the word mesoleret basically he's acting lewdly is like playing or that is the expression mesoleret. So it's going to be applied to the discussions about lesbians in Jewish law. The Hebrew word is mesolelet, appears in a different tractate, I believe, or maybe even in Sanhedrin, but here she is playing with her son, and as part of this playing, which again is very strange for our own standards, the initial stage of intercourse took place, and Beit Shammai says that disqualifies her from marrying into the priesthood, that is considered for a legal act of intercourse, and therefore she is rendered a zonah and cannot marry into a priesthood. The term zonah in modern Hebrew is whore or prostitute, but in Talmudic terminology is something very very specific, and that is someone who engages in a relationship, a woman who engages in a relationship with whom she is forbidden to have sex. Okay, so that woman is rendered technically a zonah, is a technical word, and that means that she cannot marry into a priesthood. She cannot marry to a priest. I'm going to,
Is a woman who's already had a son allowed to marry into the priesthood anyway? I mean, isn't she already a widow or divorcee? Can she
so,
marry?
so for example, if she's a widow to begin, she can marry into the priesthood.
Oh, she can.
Widows can marry. She cannot marry a high priest. If she's a divorcee, she cannot. Let's say that she had a child with another Jew that she was allowed to have a child with without being married. So that she won't be rendered a zonah because she's allowed to have, this is someone who is otherwise permitted to her. So even though we will, that's what I try to take you away from the modern term zonah. Okay, so if a woman were to have intercourse with 10 different men, even in one night, that she could technically marry them.
I guess you got lost.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I am back into my computer. Good. So if a woman were to, what renders a woman a zonah is that she has intercourse with someone that she can actually not marry. For example, a Gentile or an incestuous relationship or adultery. But if a woman were to have intercourse with 10 men in one night, and all the men are men that she could actually marry according to Jewish law, then she's not rendered a zonah. Even though in modern Israel, that's what they will call her. Okay?
Would she have to have two witnesses? Would there have to be two witnesses to watch
It's a
this
good
happening?
question. It's a good question. I assume that will be the case, Nora, but I am not. Hi, Luis. But I am. Yes, I don't know. The assumption is that for everything needs to be witnesses. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's continue a little here. Amar Rabbi here. Continue, Rabbi here. Steve, please.
Over here, so Rabbi Bar Namani says that Rav Hista says, and some say that Rav Hista says that Zeriri says, all but Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel concede with regard to a boy 9 years and 1 day old that his intercourse is regarded as intercourse, and this qualifies a woman for marrying into the priesthood, as well as results in a liability to receive the death penalty, even though he himself is not liable to receive it. And they also concede concerning a boy less than 8 years old that his intercourse is not regarded as intercourse, vis-a-vis these halachot. They disagree only about a boy who's 8 years old. Beit Shammai maintains that we learn from earlier generations when people were able to father children at that age, and we apply that the reality to the present. And Beit Hillel maintains that we do not learn from earlier generations. That's a strange comment. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive that in earlier generations men fathered children at this age? If we say that we know this from the following calculation, it's written, is this not Bathsheba, daughter of Elam, wife of Uriah the Hittite? And it's also written, and Elam, son of Antiophel, the Gilonite, which teaches that Bathsheba was the granddaughter of Antiophel, and it's written with reference to the birth of Solomon. And he sent by the hand of Nathan the prophet, and he called his name Jedidiah for the Lord's sake. I don't follow any of that, but and later is written, and it came to pass after 2 years.
Okay, hi, I'm sorry, I was muted. Let me interrupt you for a second, for a couple of seconds, Steve. They are going to, they want to prove that in earlier generations, men fathered children at
Years old.
Yes, at 8 years old, and they are going to bring a series of personalities and people and verses from the book of Samuel, okay? And hopefully we are going to get an idea from this family tree, okay? But you will get lost in the middle. I'm already got lost because I don't know some of these people, but we'll see what it takes us, okay? So
They don't mention the ages here. They just.
no. We are going to see where the take us, okay?
And later it is written, and it came to pass after 2 years that Absalom had sheep shearers, and at that time Amnon was killed. This being at least 2 years after Solomon was born, and afterward it is written. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years, so that there was 5 years after Solomon was born. And it's written, so Absalom dwelt 2 years in Jerusalem and did not see the king's face, bringing the tally to 7 years after Solomon was born. And it is written, and it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said to the king, I pray you, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. This was the beginning of Absalom's rebellion against David. Accordingly, at the time, Solomon was at least seven years old, and at some point during the rebellion, it is written, and when Antiphil saw so that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and arose and went to his house, to his city, and put his household in order and strangled himself and died.
That means he hung himself.
You need to continue because they're going to bring the proof, okay? So let's continue.
And it is written, bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days. And keeping with this verse, it is taught in a Baraita, all Doeg's years were only 34, and Nithofel's were only 33. Neither reached the age of 35, half of the normal lifespan of 70 years.
If you remember, we say three score years and 10 life. So that in an average life, according to the Bible, is 70 years old. Okay, so Doeg and Ahitophel lived 34 and 33. Okay,
Based on this, one can calculate how many years did Ahitophel live. 33, subtract 7 years, Solomon's age at the time, Ahithophel's death which leaves Ahithophel 26 years old at the time of Solomon's birth. Subtracted 2 more years for 3 pregnancies, one preceding the birth of Elam, the son of Ahithophel, and one preceding the birth of Bathsheba, daughter of Elam, and one preceding the birth of Solomon, son of Bathsheba. It turns out that 3 generations were born in 24 years, and that each and every parent begot a child at the age of 8.
Okay, that's a long explanation. Look at the note on the top right.
2 years for 3 pregnancies. This calculation is based on the assumption that the pregnancy extended for 7 months, plus 1 month for purification. The early commentaries note, seeing that these 3 pregnancies did not involve the same woman, this reckoning is not exact. In their opinion, the pregnancies extended for 21 months, and the Gemara was not concerned about being precise about the number of months. Alternatively, the pregnancies extended for 9 months each, or 27 months altogether, and the Gemara was not concerned about the additional 3 months, since the essentials of the claim were already proven even without this.
Okay, so in other words, I tried to prove from these connections that when we have these three people were 3 generations in 24 years, that means that a child begot a son at the age of 8. And I know that you cannot see me now. Now you can see. Okay. So, again, it's strange. They are bringing. This is a little. This is versus arithmetic. They take the information, which this is a big parenthesis, but I want to encourage you to read. If you most of us are familiar with the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and we are doing a little Gemara, but not everybody is familiar with the I would say the early prophets, which is the book of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. So if you can, the book of Samuel is fascinating, and a lot of information is here in the Talmud. They will take for granted that the reader knows all these names, and I know that
it's a good point.
I know that some of you know the names, but some of the names may not be familiar. These are all the names in the book of Samuel, and you need to be familiar with the rape of Tamar and with the rebellion of Absalom and Solomon and Bathsheba and Nathan. So these are bringing all these proofs to prove that it could be a case that the 3 generations were born in 24 years and that each and every parent begot a child at the age of 8. Okay, so this is how they arrive through all these 4 paragraphs on page 133 to that proof. Please continue, Steve.
Question is, are all these births related to each other? Otherwise, it's just separate people, different people that.
So that's how they calculate. Some of them there are. I think here is the question. Sorry.
Are all these children? Whoops, where'd you go?
Give me just 1 second. For the 3 pregnancies, one preceding the birth of Eliam, the son of Ahitophel, one preceding the birth of Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, and one preceding the birth of Solomon, son of Bathsheba. So these are the look at the top of the page. This is not Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, and Eliam, son of Ahitophel. So these are the 3 that they are trying to prove together. Okay, so this, is arithmetic. I need to remember here Isabel Gross, may she rest in peace, who helped us always with the math. If you remember, Isabel used to love math, Talmudic math, and used to give us some information and used to do these calculations very quickly. I'm going to see if I can fix my camera. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Why don't you just send it?
I'm sorry, it's annoying that I don't have. Okay. You know how I look, yes?
I guess they subtracted those 2 years because after every birth, you have to wait almost a year before you can have another child, right?
They go also and they say maybe we're not with the same women. I am not going to go into all the details, but I let you, Judy, explore it a little more and come up with some good answers. Okay?
All those fathers in the same family tree. That's what I was asking. It's hard to follow the names.
Yes. So you have Bathsheba is the daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah, and Eliam was the son of Ahitophel. So Bathsheba is the granddaughter of Ahitophel. Okay, that's the point. Okay, Ahitophel was the counselor of David, and can you see me? Yes, there my computer died again, so I can only see one at a time. So let's continue a little more. Okay.
Gemara refutes this proof. But where do you prove this? Perhaps both Ahithophel and his son Eliam fathered children when they were each 9 years old, and Bathsheba gave birth to Solomon when she was 6, because a woman is stronger and can conceive at an earlier age. Know that this is true, that a woman conceived at an early age, as Bathsheba had already given birth to a child from David before giving birth to Solomon. Therefore, no proof can be derived from here.
Okay.
Okay, so this leads me.
We don't have to take it, we are not talking about, this is not a biology class. This is how the Talmud is playing with these names and the ages. So let's continue a little more. Okay?
What happened to that first son that Bathsheba gave David?
He died. This was the son that was committed in adultery, that was begotten in adultery. If you remember the story of Nathan the prophet, when Nathan comes and admonishes King David, he says, and your son will die.
All right, so the kid didn't do adultery. It was punishment for David.
Yes, yes, I know you wanted me, Steve, to engage in the theology of that, but I am not going to.
No, that's an old story. It's an old story.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
You have something?
Now, yeah, well, years ago, when I was about,
It's a good, yes. It's
I was about 10 years old. Anyway, my father would always read excerpts from a newspaper all the time. And all of a sudden he said, read from a young girl from Guatemala at 6 years old having a baby. And I never forgot that.
you know, you make me happy because it looks like these things could, yes. No, I don't have too much to add to that, okay? But you know, Cheryl, if you have the Richard nearby, let's see if you or him can do some research about even the slightest possibilities of these things happening. When is the earliest possible pregnancy? The earliest possible, father, like possibility of a child giving, fathering a child. I'm curious about the medical part of this.
I know that when I taught in East Harlem, there would be an occasional story of a very young male or a very young female, and some.
Yeah.
I'll ask Rich.
I am sure there are some statistics about that. Okay, let's continue a little more.
Rather, it is from here that one can deduce that in early generations, men fathered children at the age of 8, as it is written. And these are the generations that Terah begot Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. And Abraham was at least 1 year older than Nahor, and Nahor was 1 year older than Haran. So it turns out that Abraham was 2 years older than Haran. And it's written, and Abraham and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, daughter of Haran, father of Milcah and father of Iscah. And Rabbi Yitzchak says, Iscah is in fact Sarah. And why was she called Iscah? Because she envisioned hidden matters by means of divine inspiration. And this explains what is written. And all that Sarah has said to you, hearken to her voice. Alternatively, Sarah was also called Iscah because all gazed upon her beauty, and it's written, and Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born to him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth? How much older was Abraham than Sarah? He was 10 years older than her, and it's stated above. He was 2 years older than her father, Haran. It turns out that when Haran begot Sarah, he begot her at the age of 8.
Okay, so that seems to be like a proof. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara
refutes this proof. But where do you prove this? Perhaps Abraham was the youngest of the brothers and not the oldest among them. The fact that Abraham is listed first is no proof that he was the oldest, as perhaps the verse listed them in order of their wisdom, and therefore Abraham, being the wisest, was mentioned first. Know that it is true that the verse sometimes lists brothers not in according to their birth order, but in order of their degrees of wisdom, as it's written. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth. According to this, Shem was at least 1 year older than Ham, and Ham was 1 year older than Japheth. So it turns out that Shem was 2 years older than Japheth, and it's written, and Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth, and it's written. These are the descendants of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. If Shem was the oldest brother, how could he be only 100 years old? He must have been at least 102 years old, as Noah was 500 years old when his third son was born. He was 600 years old at the time of the flood.
So from here we learn, continue.
Rather, the verse listed them in order of the degrees of wisdom, Shem being the wisest with regard to his age. Shem was the youngest of the brothers, having been born when Noah was 502 years old. Shem begot a son 100 years later, which was 2 years after the flood. Here too, then, with regard to the sons of Terah, it can be regarded that the verse lists them in order of the degree of wisdom.
Okay.
Rav Kana says, I stated this discussion before Rav Zevid of Nahadas when he heard it. He said to me, you learn that Shem was not Noah's oldest son from there, and we learn it from here. And to Shem, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, to him also were children born.
Okay, it says Iftach the elder. Okay, let's
This
continue.
verse indicates that Japheth, rather than Shem, was the oldest of the brothers.
So all the math that takes for granted that Abraham was the oldest doesn't help, because the fact that he's mentioned first doesn't mean that he's the oldest. So they need another proof. Rather, let's continue.
Gemara asks, Rabbi, from where do we derive that in earlier generations men fathered children at the age of 8? From here it is written, and Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, made all that the Lord commanded Moses. And it is written, and Azubah died, and Caleb took for himself Ephrat, who bore him Hur, and Hur begot Uri, and Uri begot Bezalel.
This is of Chronicles that of which I really know very little. Okay. Let's
And
continue.
when Bezalel made the tabernacle, how old was he? He must have been at least 13 years old, as is written. And all the wise men that carried out the work of the sanctuary came every man from his work that day. And one who's less than 13 years is not called a man, and is taught in a Baraita. In the first year following the exodus from Egypt, Moses made the tabernacle. In the second year, he erected the tabernacle and sent out the spies.
Page 135.
And it's written that Caleb, Bezalel's great-grandfather, said to Joshua, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And he added, and now behold, I am this day 85 years old. How many years old was Caleb when he was sent off with the spies? He was 40. Subtract 14 years, as Bezalel was at least 14 years old when Caleb was sent to spy out the land. This is known because that mission took place a year after the tabernacle was erected. This leaves 26 years. Subtract 2 more years for 3 pregnancies, one preceding the birth of Ur, son of Caleb, one preceding the birth of Uri, son of Hur, and one preceding the birth of Bezalel, son of Uri. It turns out that 3 generations were born in 24 years, and that each and every parent begot a child at the age of 8.
Very nice. So let me summarize. Ishar Koach, Steve. Let me ask you first to go to page 132, Steve, and read the bottom note of the page from early generations.
In early generations, may be asked, what is the purpose of learning from earlier generations when it's obvious that this is not part of the natural order in later generations? Some suggest that if in earlier generations, people begot children before the age of 9, then even in later generations, the intercourse of a boy less than 9 years old should be regarded as intercourse. As to why there seems to be a difference between the generations concerning the ability to father a child, some explain that in early generations, it was through divine assistance that people begot children at such an early age, and therefore nothing can be learned from them. Others explain that even in early generations, people who begot children at such an early age were exceptional.
Okay, now if you go, because they are discussing the legal age for fathering a child, and this is the context, beginning on page 133, they bring 3 examples from where can we learn on that a child can father, that a person can father a child at the age of 8. So they bring first from the genealogy of Bathsheba, the wife of King David, and then if you look at the bottom of page 133, it says the Gemara refutes this proof. Okay.
Okay, Rabbi.
You see there They bring
Yeah.
4 paragraphs on page 133, and then on page 133, 2 paragraphs on the bottom, the Gemara refutes this proof. Then the Gemara, once the Gemara refutes the proof, it says, Ela, rather. Let me give you another example. So they bring the second example from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, and Haran, and the Gemara is going to refute this proof also on page 134 on the second paragraph. The Gemara refutes this proof, and the way the Gemara refutes the proof is by showing that the order doesn't mean that one is older, but could be more prominent. And they bring other examples in which being mentioned first is not a sign of being older chronologically, but wisdom. So they bring the case of Shem, but actually Yafet was the oldest. So that also didn't work. So the Gemara asked again the question for a third time, rather, from where do we derive that in early generations men fathered children at the age of 8? And they bring the proof from the Betzalel, son of Uri and son of Hur. And again, we need a little to be familiar with some of the names there. And Caleb and Miriam are part of the genealogy there as well. Okay, and they do not challenge. So apparently, the third proof stands.
So
Okay.
Rabbi, last week, I think it was last week, we discussed that there are 2 types of normal pregnancies. One is 7 months and one is 9 months.
Yes.
And at 7 months, then everything's advanced. So if these children were born at 7 months, perhaps they can father a child at 8 years old.
Yes, and if you see the note on page 133, I think you read it. The calculation is based on the assumption that the pregnancy is extended for 7 months, plus 1 month for purification. So this is one option, and then they bring another option as well. Okay, so yes, it could be that, again, in order for all these numbers to fit, everything needs to be perfect. Someone needs to be pregnant immediately at a particular time. I think the Gemara is doing, we call it intellectual arithmetic. It's really playing with the numbers and the possibilities. Okay, I don't want to read too much into that. If I can just have one thing to what I can take from these 3 pages that Steve read is I am curious medically about the possibility of younger children, both men and women becoming parents. I'm just curious, that's number 1. And B, I like you to be familiar with these names, and if you can explore them a little further, but not too much to add here, okay?
Rabbi, the ludicrousness of this to us in 3 generations and 24 years and so forth is no more ridiculous to us, I would think, than Noah lived for 500 years. He begat 1 son, and then he built the ark when he was 600. You know, when we get out of bed at age 70 and say, "Oh, my elbow hurts and my shoulder hurts," so you know, if they can say, well, in those days people begat children younger, they also say in those days they lived for 900 years.
Yes, it's possible. You have a good point, but I am, you know, I that will be a good way to explain it, Cheryl. I'm just curious, you know, if medicine will change, and today we consider that people live 90 years old is an old age, you know, and the life expectation changed even in our own time, we see it changing, maybe 10 years since some of our younger and now. And what will happen in 50 years from now? We really don't know. So I am just curious. So that answer that you are giving, Cheryl, is always a good answer, and I take.
But we also know that the age of onset of puberty has come down, so that it was most common when I was very, very young that you didn't begin to menstruate until you were roughly 13. I think the age has dropped to 12 or 11, and it's common for girls of 9 and 10 to begin menstruating.
So why is that?
That's because the hormones that they give the cows and all kinds of things are now in the foods that the kids are eating, and that's causing the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cheryl, if you have a doctor in the house, maybe you can ask him all these questions.
He's upstairs with his hachinuch, preparing for the Thursday class.
Oh, very nice. Look, it doesn't have to be. Anybody who would like to do a little research on that, I'm just curious, okay?
I'll ask him. He'll probably do it.
And again, I also got stuck with what Sela said about this girl from Guatemala said. You know, you're saying again.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What did I say?
You see about this girl that
What
you
her
remember.
father read in the newspaper.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, but about the age coming down, I had read on somewhere. It is the hormones. They're very worried about that.
Yeah.
And the plastic and whatever else.
Yes, I'm curious about the Guatemalan girl who gave birth. These cases, what they do is they bring the stories to maybe a possibility of reality, maybe, okay? Doesn't explain why Adam lived 930 years, but I'm just curious if there is one single girl in Nicaragua or in Guatemala who gave birth at the age of 10, I like just to know that, okay? I'm just curious.
Rabbi, just one other thing. In the Haggadah, there was also something about the plagues. I mean, nobody could figure it out, you know?
Yes, that again, yes, I don't have much to add about that as well. I think there is
the same kind of thing to figure that out.
Yes, I think that has also to do an element of faith, Sela, and how people relate to, you know, I think there is an element of faith. Again, I'm just curious if you can explain something naturally, then you don't have to say everything is possible in the you know, in God's realm. That's where my curiosity comes. Okay.
I just Googled it. Lina Marcela Medina de Jurado was born in 1933. She's a Peruvian woman who became the youngest confirmed mother in history when she gave birth at aged 5 years, 7 months, and 21 days.
Look at that. Look at that. Okay.
Rabbi,
they didn't say the year from that
Yes,
newspaper. I was 10 at the time.
I will
It was
I
in
will
the
say
1950s.
I would say Holy Mother. Yes,
Yeah.
David.
yeah, getting back to the ages of people like Noah, isn't there a passage in the Bible where Hashem says that he's going to, after Noah and Methuselah, I guess, that he's going to start limiting the age of people to 120 years? So that would indicate that all of these advanced ages that we read about were the work of Hashem, rather than any sort of natural occurrence.
Yes, the problem with that statement, at least partially, David, is that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived more than 120, and they were after Noah. But you are absolutely right, and you're absolutely right. And then the extravagant or the crazy ages stopped after Noah. Yes. Basically, with Abraham lives 170, I think, 5 years old. Sarah lived 127, you know, but then Moses lived 120.
Right.
And we can that then people lived less years. Yes,
And
David.
I just found one for Sean Stewart was 11 when he had sex with his 15-year-old next door neighbor, Emma Webster. 9 months later, he was given the day off school to be present when his son, Ben Lewis, was born on January 20th, 1998, just a month after his 12th birthday. So he was 11.
Okay. Not 8, but 11. Okay.
Here I have 9-year-old boy and 8-year-old woman in China in 1910.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
Just one thing. I just have now. I'm trying to remember what I wanted to ask you, and I forgot just now. Oh yeah, are we from Shem or Ham?
We are from Shem.
Okay.
We're from the wise one.
That's why we are Semites. Semites come from Shem.
Wow.
Semites, we are Semites. Anti-Semites, they are those who are against the Semites who come from Shem. By the way, the Arabs are also Semites. Okay, let's continue a little more. I am going to ask David if you can read, okay? Now we go back to the Ben Sorero More.
Right.
135.
Are we at the Mishnah? The Mishnah teaches? I'm not sure where our place is.
Yes, the Mishnah teaches. You are there. Yes.
Okay. The Mishnah teaches that the penalty for rebelliousness is imposed upon a son, but not upon a daughter. It is taught in a Baraita. Rabbi Shimon says it would be reasonable that a daughter should be fit to be treated like a stubborn and rebellious son, and to be punished like him if she sins in the same way as he does. The reason is that all are found frequently within her sin. And in the end, she will be a sinner and cause others to sin. But it is a Torah edict that the penalty for rebelliousness is imposed only upon a son and not upon a daughter.
Hey, let's look at what does it mean on page 135, the top. It would be reasonable.
Right. It would be reasonable that a daughter should be fit. The Jerusalem Talmud asserts that given the counterintuitive nature of the halachot of a stubborn and rebellious son, they must be a divine decree. So there is no room to question why they do not apply to a girl. The Rambam explains that girls are not as likely as boys to be drawn by gluttony and inebriation to be led into a life of transgression. This contradicts the statement of Rabbi Shimon. The Radbaz explains that the opinion recorded in the Mishnah is actually more extensive than that of Rabbi Shimon. According to the Mishnah, not only is a girl not subject to the death penalty, there is no punishment for her at all. The Rambam rules in accordance with this opinion.
Why I'm glad that you read this, David, because the halacha is that the girl can never be a stubborn and rebellious son. Of course, it's a daughter, but that law doesn't apply to girls. And this is an edict from the Torah. Rabbi Shimon feels that he needs to tell us that it's only because of the edict that the girl cannot be, but actually girls could be as sinners, if not more than boys. And he throws a very misogynist statement. The Hebrew is akol metzuin etzla ba'aveira, that all are found frequently with her in sin. Yes, so this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And the Rambam doesn't agree with Rabbi Shimon here. Of course, the Rambam was later after Rabbi Shimon, and the Radbaz goes a little further. But the Rambam doesn't like that part, and the Rambam says that actually women are not found to be gluttonous and drinking so much. I think that Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. I'm almost positive, and he is. He was talking to his son Rabbi Shimon, and he says, "Nashim da'atan kalot." The women have a very low. I don't say resistance to pain, or they are very frivolous. So these are statements of particular rabbis that maybe the statement is not only reflecting the time that these statements were stated, but also the particular ideology of Rabbi Shimon in this case.
So Rabbi,
yes.
why do they limit rebelliousness only to drunkenness and overeating?
Why? We are going to say that. The reason is, Steve, and this is a good segue to the next paragraph. I'm going to read it. You don't have to go back. All this chapter is based on these 4 verses in the Torah. So the Torah says, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, and then the Torah says, they come, the parents, and they say to the elders of the city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard. This is the verse. So the rabbis are going to associate this rebelliousness to gluttony and drunkenness. And this is going to be very important, Steve, as we are going to see now, because they are going to limit their rebelliousness only to these 2 transgressions, not to other things, and to many other details that are related to these 2. So we are going to see, once David starts reading Mishnah, how does it play all this? Okay, let's continue, David. The Mishnah.
From when is a stubborn and rebellious son liable? From when he eats a tartameir of meat and drinks a half log of Italian wine. Rabbi Yossi says, from when he eats a mana of meat and drinks a log of wine.
Let's look at the language, tartameir. Yes. Okay, sorry. Yes, go.
From the Greek tritamoton, meaning 1/3. This was also the name of a coin in the Talmudic period.
So he needs to eat food, meat, for the value of 1 tartameir. What is a log? Yes.
A log is a unit of volume used to measure liquids. A range of modern opinions estimates this volume at 300 to 600 milliliters.
Okay, what is the maneh?
A mana is an ancient measure of weight that was in use for thousands of years. Since it was used over such a long period of time and in so many different places, there were differences in its weight. There were also differences between a mana used for weighing standard items and a mana used to weigh precious metals. An ordinary mana weighed approximately 490 grams. There was also a mana that was about twice as heavy. It would appear that the reference here is to an ordinary mana.
Okay, looks at the halakha.
From when he eats meat and drink, etc., a stubborn and rebellious son is liable only if he eats a quantity of meat weighing a tartameir and drinks a half log of wine at one time. According to the Radbaz, there is no requirement that it be Italian wine.
And tell us a little about Italian wine at the bottom.
Italian wine. It is evident from several Talmudic sources that this was choice wine, stronger than other wines. According to the Ramah, the term Italian does not refer to the type of wine, but to its quantity. It refers to a certain volume associated with that place, as opposed to other volumes for a log that were in use. It also explains why the Rambam does not mention Italian wine in his ruling.
Okay, so the Mishnah is, we now know the minimum measurements that he needs to eat, which is something that is reasonable. And now let's continue on page 136. The Mishnah.
The Mishnah now lists a series of conditions concerning his eating and drinking. If he ate these items with a group assembled for the performance of a mitzvah, or he ate them at a meal celebrating the incalculation of a month, or he ate the items when they had second tithe status, in Jerusalem, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son because each of these circumstances involves some aspect of a mitzvah. If he ate the meat unslaughtered if he ate the meat of unslaughtered animal carcasses or animals that had wounds that would have caused them to die within 12 months, or repugnant creatures or creeping animals, or he ate untithed produce from which tithes and teruma were not separated, or first tithe from which his teruma was not separated, or second tithe outside Jerusalem, or consecrated food that was not redeemed, each of which involves a transgression, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son.
Continue.
Going,
Yes, yes.
the Mishnah summarizes, if he ate an item that involves performing a mitzvah or an item that involves committing a transgression, or if he ate any food in the world but did not eat meat, or if he drank any beverage but did not drink wine, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son unless he actually eats meat and actually drinks wine, as it is stated. This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He does not listen to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. One is not called a glutton and a drunkard unless he eats meat and drinks wine. And although there is no explicit proof to the matter that the reference in the Torah is to meat and wine, there is an allusion to the matter in another verse, as it is stated, "Be not among wine drinkers, among gluttonous eaters of meat."
Okay, in other words, we don't have a source for the halakha, but we have a reference that we can serve a little as a source. So we are learning that we need many conditions to happen in order for a child, a son, to become a rebellious and stubborn son. Let's look at the halakha on the top. David?
If he ate with a group for the performance of a mitzvah, if a rebellious son ate with a group of people assembled for the performance of a mitzvah, even a mitzvah by rabbinic law, such as comforting mourners, or he ate a second tithe in Jerusalem, he is exempt from the death penalty. Similarly, he is exempt if eating involved a prohibition by Torah law, such as unslaughtered animal carcasses or terifot, or even a prohibition by rabbinic law, such as eating on a communal fast.
Okay, now I like just to take this advantage of this to learn a little about some concepts, and this we learn that if he were to eat any of these things, he will not become a ben sorer umoreh, or he ate it at an intercalation of the month. So at the background, we are going to learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these concepts, and I'm going to ask you, David, to read, and we are going to learn what these are.
Intercalculation of a month. The moon's monthly cycle is slightly more than 29 and a half days in the Talmud, unless stated otherwise. A month has 29 days. It was, however, frequently necessary to add an additional day to the month. During the long period of antiquity, when the Hebrew calendar was established by the court based on the testimony of witnesses who had seen the new moon, the addition of an extra day to a month was determined by their testimony. If the moon was sighted on the night of the 29th day of the month, the next day was the first day of the following month. If the moon was not sighted at night, or if witnesses to the new moon did not appear in Jerusalem to testify the following day, an extra day was added to the previous month. In that case, both the 30th and the 31st day would be treated as the dates of the new moon. Since the 4th century CE, the Jewish calendar has operated on a fixed astronomical system, which generally must have 29 days alternate with those of 30 days. This Gemara refers to a feast at the gathering held to determine the lengthening of the months.
Okay. And this concept that I want you to be familiar with is called Ibur HaChodesh, the intercalation of the month. And you are, we have now the Sinai and Schwartz Brothers calendars, and this calendar that we have which tells us which day is going to be the holiday for every year in advance. It's basically a calendar that is in place since the 4th century CE. I'm going to ask you, David, to continue reading the next notes, and I will take a little break of 2 minutes to get some sugar, okay? David? Yes?
Can't hear you.
Yes, continue, please, David, reading the background, and I will be back very soon, okay?
Second tithe. Second tithe is a tithe set aside after teruma has been given to the priests, and first tithe has been given to the Levites. Second tithe was given during the first, second, fourth, and fifth years of the sabbatical cycle. After the second tithe was removed, it was brought to Jerusalem to be eaten by its owner. If the journey to Jerusalem was very long, making it difficult to carry all the second tithe produce there, or in the event that the produce became ritually impure, it could be redeemed for an equivalent sum of money. This redemption money was then brought to Jerusalem, where it was spent on any type of food. If the owner redeemed his own produce, he had to add 1/5 of its value to the total. A boy overindulging in second tithe meat is not subject to the halachot of his stubborn and rebellious son. Might as well keep going. Unslaughtered animal carcasses. Not all carcasses of animals fall within this halachic definition. Specifically, it includes the carcasses of large mammals, whether or not they are kosher animals. Among kosher animals, this includes an animal that died of natural causes or as a result of an improperly performed act of ritual slaughter. It is prohibited to eat an unslaughtered animal, and that animal is a primary source of ritual impurity. Although the unslaughtered kosher animal may not be eaten, one may derive financial benefit from it. Certain types of severe anatomical defects, for example, an animal whose thigh was removed, place an animal in this category even while alive. Keep going?
Yes.
Okay. Terefat. Generally speaking,
Treifot is now, David, you are going to read the technical definition of the word treifa, which is the source of what we call treif. You know, treif as opposed to kosher, his treif, it's treif.
Mhm.
The treif that we use is a lax term derived from here, but treifa is has a very narrow definition, which is what you are going to read now. Okay.
Generally speaking, a terefa is an animal that is suffering from a condition that will cause it to die within 12 months. It is prohibited by Torah law to eat an animal that has been injured or is stricken with a disease of this nature, even if it undergoes ritual slaughter, although the actual source for this prohibition is a matter of dispute. Some authorities cite Exodus 22:30, "You shall not eat any flesh that is torn from beasts in the field," while others suggest Deuteronomy 14:21, "You shall not eat anything that died of itself." According to the Minchat, Hinuk, and others, both verses together serve as a source for the prohibition. Repugnant creatures or creeping animals. This category includes many non-kosher animals. Tosafot Yam Tov, Tosafot Yom Tov distinguishes between the two terms, suggesting that Shekazim refers to small creatures in the sea and on land, as well as birds and insects labeled as Shekatzim in the Torah. Remasim, by contrast, refers to worms and other creatures that infect produce. During Talmudic times, Remasim were believed to come into being through spontaneous generation.
Okay, and I give credit to James that is telling us what the rabbis in the Talmud believe, and he is okay with that. Okay, that was the belief at that time, probably as it was in the entire world at that time. Let's continue. The last one.
Teruma of the tithe. The Levites are commanded to separate 1/10 of the tithe given to them and give that to the priests. All the halachot applying to terumah also apply to terumah of the tithe. Even today, terumah of the tithe must be separated from produce, despite the fact that it is considered to be in a state of ritual impurity and therefore cannot be eaten.
Okay. So this is a lot of information in the Mishnah, and we learn here that Ben Sorer More, stubborn and rebellious son, needs to. It's not enough that he's rebellious in the way we understand the word rebellious and stubborn today, but he needs to eat a particular amount of meat and drink a particular amount of wine, and it needs to happen according to the Mishnah cannot be a wine of transgression or mitzvah or meat of transgression and mitzvah. And this is the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to go even further and is going to limit it even more. So, Ishar Koach David, and I'm going to ask Cheryl if you can read the next.
Rabbi,
Yes.
before you go, I know you can only see one person at a time, but we have another addition to the class.
Okay, let me see who is. Let me see if it's okay. Oh, this is Fabio. Hola, Fabio. Mashlomcha, ¿cómo estás?
Shalom, shalom. Hello to everybody.
Hello.
I'm a friend from the Rabbi from when I was in Thailand here in Israel. So thank you very much that you welcome to your class. Thank you.
So Fabio lives in Israel. He's joining us to this Talmud class. Fabio is writing a PhD at Bar-Ilan University on the lives of the converso Jews in Amsterdam and the Marranos. So maybe one day we'll invite him to share some information with us. But the claim to fame of Fabio is that he was my classmate in boarding school when I was 16 years old. So we go a long, long time ago. Please, Fabio, do not tell all the secrets to my congregants, okay? So I will send you by email, bli neder, the Masechet that we are studying in a PDF, so you will have it. We are about to, I don't know how long you were here, but in general, I am in front of my computer and I can see everybody, but my computer is not working well now. So I'm using the phone. And so by next class, I'm going to send you everything. We are now in Masechet Sanhedrin, Amud Ayin Aleph 70a, and we are going to ask Cheryl to continue reading for us. Okay?
The Gemara.
Yeah.
Rabbi Zeira says, concerning this tartemar that is mentioned in the Mishnah, I do not know what its measure is. But since Rabbi Yosei is found to have doubled the measure of the wine, as the unattributed opinion in the Mishnah speaks of a half log, whereas Rabbi Yosei requires a log, he presumably is found to have doubled the measure of the meat as well. Therefore, it turns out that a tartemar is equivalent to 1/2 of a maneh.
Okay, so if a maneh is whatever it was here, let me just remember 500 grams, so tartemar is 250 grams. Okay, let's continue.
Rav Hanan Bar Molada says that Rav Huna says, a stubborn and rebellious son is not liable unless he purchases inexpensive bezol meat and eats it, and he buys inexpensive wine and drinks it, as it is written, he is a glutton, zolel, and a drunkard. And Rav Hanan Bar Molada says that Rav Huna says, a stubborn and rebellious son is not liable unless he eats raw meat and drinks undiluted wine. The Gemara raises a difficulty. Is that so? But don't Rabbah and Rav Yosef both say if he ate raw meat or drank undiluted wine, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son? Ravina said the two conflicting statements can be reconciled if he ate totally raw meat or drank totally undiluted wine. He is in fact exempt. The undiluted wine for which he is liable is wine that is diluted, but not diluted properly. And the raw meat for which he is liable is meat that is cooked, but not cooked properly, like the scorched meat that thieves are wont to eat, due to the hasty manner in which they must prepare their food.
Okay, so here we are seeing how we're going to see how the halacha, how is everything limited to the extent that the ben sorer umore can almost never be found. Let's continue a little more.
Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef both say, if he ate heavily salted meat or drank wine from his winepress, that is wine that is not finished fermenting, he does not become a stubborn and rebellious son. And on a related topic, we learned in a Mishnah elsewhere in Ta'anit 26b, on the eve of the 9th of Av, a person may not eat 2 cooked dishes in one meal. And furthermore, he may neither eat meat nor drink wine, and a Tana taught in a Baraita, but one may eat heavily salted meat, as it is not considered meat, and one may drink wine from his winepress before it is properly fermented.
So here we have a definition of meat and wine, and they bring it from an source, and that is that in the eve of Tisha B'Av, which is a time of mourning, you cannot drink wine or eat meat, but apparently if someone were to eat heavily salted meat, that is not considered meat, and drank wine from the wine press before it has fermented, that prohibition doesn't apply. The Gemara continues.
The Gemara asks, with regard to salted meat on the eve of the 9th of Av, how long must this meat remain in salt before it is permitted? Rabbi Chanina Bar Kahana says, as long as it is like a peace offering, which could be eaten for 2 days and 1 night after it was sacrificed. After this time has passed, it is no longer the type of meat that one may not eat during that meal. Therefore, if it was salted for longer than this, it may be eaten on the eve of the 9th of Av. The Gemara inquires further, and with regard to wine from his press before it has properly fermented, until when is wine considered in this category? As long as it is still fermenting. And it is taught in a Baraita, fermenting wine is not subject to the prohibition of exposed liquids, as there is no concern that a snake will leave its venom in that wine. And how long is its initial fermenting period? 3 days from the time the grapes were pressed. The Gemara clarifies, these definitions of salty meat and wine from his winepress were stated with regard to the prohibitions applying on the eve of the 9th of Av. Here, concerning a stubborn and rebellious son, what is considered salty meat and wine from his press? The Gemara answers, there, with regard to the eve of the 9th of Av, the prohibition is due to joy. As long as the meat is like a peace offering, there is still joy. But here, with regard to a stubborn and rebellious son, it is due to the son becoming drawn to it. And if the taste of the meat is flawed only slightly, he will not be drawn to it. And with regard to wine, there is no concern that he will be drawn to it until it is 40 days old.
Okay, and therefore, this actually limits the even more the conditions for a son to become sorer umore. Let's look at the halacha, Cheryl, on the top right.
He is not liable unless he purchases inexpensive meat, etc. A rebellious son is not liable unless he himself purchases inexpensive meat and wine. If he ate raw meat or drank undiluted wine. If a rebellious son ate meat that was entirely raw, or he drank wine that was not at all diluted, he is exempt from the death penalty. If he ate salted meat or drank wine from his winepress, if a rebellious son ate of salted meat on the 3rd day after it was salted, or drank wine straight from the winepress, he is exempt, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi and Rav Yosef. On the eve of the 9th of Av, a person may not eat, etc. On the eve of the 9th of Av, at the final meal before the fast, one may not eat meat or drink wine, nor may he eat 2 cooked dishes, but one may eat salted meat, etc. Even though, according to strict law, one may eat salted meat and drink wine fresh from the winepress on the eve of the 9th of Av, the Tur, citing the Or Zarua, notes that it is customary not to do so. Fermenting wine. The prohibition against drinking exposed liquids does not apply to wine that is fermenting, that is, during the first 3 days from the time the grapes were pressed.
Let's look at the second note.
as long as it is like a peace offering. As explained in Baba Batra, the destruction of the second temple, after the destruction of the second temple, there were those who abstained from eating meat entirely, stating, "Shall we eat meat from which offerings were sacrificed upon the altar now that the altar has ceased to exist?" Although this practice was not accepted by the sages, this restriction was applied to the meat eaten before the 9th of Av, the fast marking the destruction of the temple. Therefore, the specifics of what is considered meat with regard to that halakha are based on halachot concerning the temple service.
And this is the source for which we do not eat meat on the 9 days before Tisha B'Av. Yes, drink wine, with the exception of Shabbat. Let's look at the background. What is a peace offering, a shlamim?
Male and female cattle or sheep may be sacrificed as peace offerings. As they were offerings of lesser holiness, they may be slaughtered anywhere within the temple courtyard. Their blood is sprinkled on two opposite corners of the altar in such a manner that it will descend on each of the altar's four sides. Part of each peace offering is burned on the altar. Part is given to the priests, namely the breast and the right hind leg. The remainder is eaten by the person bringing the offering, together with other ritually pure people anywhere in the city. It may be eaten on the day the animal is sacrificed, the following day, or during the intervening night. With the exception of the festival peace offering and a few other cases, peace offerings were brought voluntarily. That is, they were free will offerings.
And this is the most simple sacrifice when people bring a sacrifice just because they want. So these are the sacrifices they bring. Part of that is the blood is sprinkled on the altar. Part is given, I think, to the priest, but the rest is eaten by the person who brings the offering. Okay, so I don't have, let me see if anybody is here that I did not.
Rabbi, did they specify the left hind leg was okay? Because, I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to look back when we learned about.
Yeah, so I
sciatic.
think it's shokayamin. There are two parts that belong to the priest, and the rest is for the person who brings the offer.
No, but remember we learned you can't eat the sciatic.
No, this is not.
But I'm looking.
No.
You know what I'm referring to? Do you remember?
Yes. No. This is
Okay, I can't.
the prohibition. The prohibition is to have the gid anashe, the sciatic nerve, and the assumption is that people who know can remove that nerve entirely, leaving still the meat there. Today we just cut the back of the animal because it's not worth, in some cases, doing all that work. And this definition of the right tithe has to do with the gifts that the Kohen receives.
Okay.
So
nerve on both hind legs?
what?
Is a sciatic nerve on both legs?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, yes, excellent. I didn't know that. Yes, I'm sure there are two nerves, one in each one, but you made me think. So we are going to leave it a little earlier today. This is a good time to stop.
Oh, there it is.
And I want to say what day is today, so we can write the date.
It's April
21.
21st.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are going to continue next week. I will be in touch with you, Fabio. Te voy a llamar un ratito ahora si querés por WhatsApp. I will call you and we can talk a little, and I will send you the stuff. And Ishar Koach, everybody who joined us today. And if you can, anybody who finds these connections, these links about birth by children, if you have some reliable material and you can send it, or if you find anything, Cheryl, from Richard, please let us know. And I wish all of you well.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God
Rabbi.
willing, the
Have a
computer
good
will
day.
Thank you.
work.
Thank you.
Also.
Ya te llamo,
Bye.
Fabio.
Come on, that shuffle bottom.
I don't know. You'll have
Whatever
to,
fits. Does it fit in there?
yeah.